They told me I was useless, said I'd never amount to anything, that I was dead weight dragging down the family name. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just built my life anyway. And what happened next, no one saw coming. If you believe in quiet, strength, second chances, and in the kind of justice that doesn't need to shout, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this one, they aren't just told, they're felt. My name is Lena Carter, and I learned what betrayal felt like long before I learned algebra. Growing up, I didn't live in a home. I lived in a war zone with pretty curtains. The kind of house where neighbors thought we had it all together, but inside, we were all walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. My father was the kind of man who never had to lift a hand to hurt you. His words were sharper than any blade, his presence heavier than silence. He could destroy your entire day with a look, your entire week with a comment, your entire sense of self with a single word. Useless. That was my name in his mouth. Useless Lena, the daughter who couldn't do anything right. He mocked my little brother Jake for crying, called him a little baby when he was only 6 years old and scared of the monster living in our house. He laughed at my mother for clipping coupons and said she was pathetic for trying to stretch our grocery money. After he'd blown half his paycheck at the casino, we never spoke at the dinner table. We listened for his mood, for the scrape of his chair, for the sigh that told us the storm was coming. The sound of his fork against his plate was like a countdown timer. Any second he might explode over something trivial. Can't you do anything right? He'd snap if I spilled water on the table. Why are you so stupid? If I asked for help with homework, you're just like your mother, weak and pathetic. When he wasn't tearing us down piece by piece, he was out drinking, gambling, complaining about how hard his life was, how we didn't appreciate him, how he could have been somebody if he hadn't been stuck with us. We were burdens. That's what he taught us every single day. Then one Tuesday morning in October, when I was 13 and Jake was 8, I came home from school to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone like it contained the meaning of life. "Mom," I said, dropping my backpack. "Where's Dad?" She looked up with eyes that seemed to see right through me, and I knew. Even before she held up the phone with her shaking hand, I knew. You'll be better off without me. That was it. That was goodbye. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual dismissal, like he was canceling a subscription he didn't want anymore. We weren't better off. My mom collapsed into a quiet grief I didn't know how to carry. She still packed our lunches, still smiled when teachers asked how we were doing. Still pretended everything was fine when the neighbors waved from their perfect porches. But at night, I'd hear her crying into a towel in the bathroom, muffling her sobs so Jake wouldn't hear. She wore her sadness like perfume, subtle, but always there. She aged 10 years in 6 months, her face losing its softness, her laugh becoming something forced and hollow. I wrote in my journal that night, "Some women cry in silence and still carry entire families on their backs." At 13, I became a parent to my younger siblings. Not by choice, but by necessity, because someone had to hold us together, and my mother was barely holding herself. I cleaned houses after school, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors for neighbors who paid me $5 an hour and acted like they were doing me a favor. I babysat spoiled neighborhood kids who had more toys than my brother had ever seen. I tutored wealthy children whose biggest worry was which iPhone their parents would buy them for Christmas. Meanwhile, Jake outgrew his shoes and wore them anyway. I skipped meals so he and Mom wouldn't have to. I stopped being a child the day he stopped being a father. 2 jobs weren't enough to keep us afloat. The bills kept coming. Rent, groceries, Jake's asthma medication that cost more than my mother made in a week. She worked doubles at the diner downtown, came home smelling like grease and exhaustion, and still found the energy to help Jake with his homework. "We're going to be okay, baby," she'd tell me when she caught me counting bills at the kitchen table. "We don't need him. We never did." But her voice would crack on those words, and I knew she was trying to convince herself as much as me. High school was a blur of work and studying. While my classmates worried about prom dates and college parties, I worried about whether we'd have heat this month. While they complained about curfews, I was tucking Jake into bed every night, reading him stories so he wouldn't cry himself to sleep asking when Daddy was coming home. I knew education was my only way out, not just for me, but for all of us. I studied until my eyes burned, worked every job I could find, and applied for every scholarship that existed. When guidance counselors asked about my future plans, I told them I was going to be successful enough to take care of my family. When I got the full ride to State University, my mother cried real tears for the first time since he left. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she whispered, holding my acceptance letter like it was made of gold. "Your father, he was wrong about you. You're going to do amazing things." College was where I found my purpose, but it wasn't easy. I majored in computer science with a minor in legal studies because I kept thinking about all the women like my mother, women who needed help but couldn't afford lawyers, who were fighting battles against men who had more money and power than they'd ever have. I lived in the cheapest dorm on campus, ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to remember, and worked at a diner just like my mother did. But every late night in the computer lab, every weekend spent coding instead of partying, every moment I felt like giving up, I thought about her. About Jake. About proving that the man who called me useless was dead wrong. I started small, a website that helped single mothers navigate the legal system. Resources for custody battles, child support enforcement, housing rights. It was just me in my dorm room at first, working until 3 a.m, fueled by coffee and rage at how unfair the world was for women who'd been left behind. The website grew. Other students started telling their mothers about it, their aunts, their sisters. Word spread through networks of women who'd been abandoned, divorced, or abused, women who needed help but had nowhere to turn. That's when I met Tyler Rodriguez, the man who would change everything. He was a guest speaker in my entrepreneurship class. Early 30s, successful tech investor, the kind of guy who could have easily dismissed a college kid with big dreams and no funding. After my presentation about expanding legal resources for single mothers, he stayed behind while other students filed out. "That's important work you're doing," he said, not talking down to me like most adults did. "How can I help?" Most men had disappointed me. Most men had proven that they'd rather tear down than build up. But Tyler was different. He didn't try to save me or fix me or tell me what I was doing wrong. He just saw what I was building and wanted to help me build it better. "Some men destroy families," he told me over coffee one afternoon, when I was struggling with imposter syndrome and the voice in my head that still whispered I wasn't good enough. "The good ones help women rebuild them." I never forgot those words. They became my motto, my mission statement, my reminder that not all men were like my father. Tyler didn't just give me money, though his initial investment of $50,000 kept me afloat during those crucial early months. He gave me mentorship, connections, and most importantly, belief in myself when I was running on empty. He taught me about business strategy, about scaling a company, about turning passion into profit without losing your soul. He introduced me to lawyers who believed in my mission, to other investors who wanted to fund women-led startups, to programmers who could help me build the platform I was dreaming of. With his help, I built something real. Carter Legal Tech grew from my dorm room project into a legitimate company with 12 full-time employees and partnerships with legal aid organizations across 3 states. We'd helped over 2,000 women fight for custody, secure child support, escape abusive relationships, and find safe housing. But I didn't stop there. I worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I never took vacations. I had something to prove, not just to the world, but to the voice in my head that still sometimes whispered useless when things got hard. I launched Carter Holdings, a real estate investment company that bought up affordable housing to keep it from being gentrified out of reach of working families. I wanted to create stable homes for people like us, people who'd been left behind by men who were supposed to protect them. By the time I turned 28, everything had changed. My mother finally quit her night cleaning job and worked part-time at a boutique she actually enjoyed. Jake got into college with a partial scholarship and was studying to become a teacher. We bought a small house with a garden where my mother could grow tomatoes and forget, for a few hours at a time, about the man who'd walked away from the best thing that ever happened to him. I was successful, respected. The little girl who'd been called useless now had her picture in the business section of the newspaper. was invited to speak at conferences, was making six figures while helping thousands of women rebuild their lives. I thought I'd moved past him. I thought the 13-year-old girl who'd felt worthless had been buried under years of achievement and growth and proof that she was anything but useless. Then one Thursday morning in November, he walked into my office. I was in a meeting with my development team, discussing the new mobile app that would help single mothers find emergency financial assistance when my assistant Sarah knocked on the conference room door. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly, "but there's a gentleman here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. Something about an eviction case." "Tell him to schedule an appointment like everyone else," I started to say, then stopped. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see him, 15 years older, 30 pounds thinner. His hair had gone completely gray, and his clothes hung loose on his frame like he'd been shrinking inside them. His shoulders were stopped, his face weathered by years of consequences he'd never had to face when he was destroying our family. But it was unmistakably him, the man who'd called me useless, who'd made my mother cry herself to sleep, who'd walked away from us like we were trash he was tired of carrying. "I'll be right back," I told my team, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. I walked to the reception area on autopilot, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the office building I'd chosen, past the motivational posters I'd selected, through the space I'd designed to feel safe and welcoming for women who'd been hurt by men exactly like him. He looked up when I approached, and I saw the exact moment he realized who I was. His face went from hopeful to confused to absolutely white with shock. "Lena?" he whispered, like he was seeing a ghost. I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't trust my voice yet. I just stood there looking at this broken shell of the man who'd once seemed so powerful, so terrifying, so capable of destroying everything in his path. I didn't know you worked here," he stammered, his voice smaller and shakier than I remembered. I need help. Legal help. My landlord is trying to evict me, and it's not fair. I've been a good tenant. I pay my rent on time, but she's raising it so high I can't afford it anymore." He paused, looking around at the successful business I'd built, at the employees working at their desks, at the awards on the wall recognizing our impact in the community. "I heard this place helps people fight unfair landlords," he continued, desperately. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Here was the man who'd taught me I was worthless, standing in the lobby of the company I'd built to help people exactly like the woman he'd abandoned, asking for help from the daughter he'd thrown away. "What's your address?" I asked calmly. He gave it to me, confusion still written across his weathered features. I recognized the street. It was in one of the neighborhoods where I'd been buying properties. I walked to my assistant's desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the property management system for Carter Holdings. I scrolled through the addresses, and there it was, his apartment building, purchased 8 months ago as part of our affordable housing initiative. The rent increase wasn't arbitrary. The building had needed significant renovations to bring it up to code. New plumbing, electrical, work accessibility features. We'd given all tenants 60 days notice, more than the legally required 30. I turned the laptop screen toward him so he could see the property management interface, see his own address listed under my company's portfolio. "I am your landlord," I said quietly. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint right there in my lobby. He gripped the edge of Sarah's desk for support, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to speak, but couldn't find the words. "The rent increase is fair market value for the area after renovations," I continued in the same calm, professional tone I used for all my business dealings. "The building needed significant work to meet safety standards. Those costs have to be recouped somehow. Lena, please," he said. And I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Desperation. Pure, terrified desperation. I know I made mistakes when you were growing up. But I'm different now. I've been sober for 3 years. I've been going to therapy. I've been trying to make amends." "To who?" I asked. "Because you never tried to make amends to us." "I wanted to," he said quickly, tears starting to form in his eyes. I was ashamed. I knew I'd hurt you all so badly, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know where to start. You could have started with an apology, I said. You could have sent child support. You could have called on birthdays or Christmas or any of the 1,000 nights Jake cried himself to sleep asking where his daddy went. He was crying now, real tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Lena. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please. I have nowhere else to go. My girlfriend kicked me out last month. I lost my job. This apartment is all I have left. I studied his face. This man who'd loomed so large in my childhood, who'd made me feel small and worthless and afraid. Standing there, in my office, begging for mercy from the daughter he'd abandoned, he looked exactly like what he was. A sad, broken man who'd destroyed everything good in his life and was finally facing the consequences. I could have helped him. I had the power to reduce his rent, to give him more time, to set up a payment plan, to be the bigger person everyone would expect me to be. The successful woman who rose above her past, who showed grace to the man who'd shown her none. But I thought about my mother, still single after all these years because she'd given her heart to a man who saw her as disposable. I thought about Jake, who'd grown up without a father and learned to be a good man anyway through sheer determination and our mother's unconditional love. I thought about the 13-year-old girl who'd skipped meals and worked 3 jobs and believed she was useless because that's what her father had taught her. I looked at this broken man standing in my office asking for help from the daughter he'd abandoned, and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No burning desire for revenge. Just clarity. I'll work with you on a payment plan, I said quietly. 6 months to adjust to the new rent, but there are conditions. His eyes widened with desperate hope. Anything. I'll do anything. You write a letter to my mother. A real apology. Not excuses. Accountability. You acknowledge what you did to us. He nodded frantically. And you make a donation to our single mother support network. Whatever you can afford. Monthly. Because there are women out there just like Mom who need help. Yes, of course. I'm not doing this for you, I interrupted. I'm doing this because I choose to be better than you were. Because revenge won't heal what you broke, but building something better will. I walked back to my conference room, where my team was waiting to discuss how we could help more women rebuild their lives. Through the glass wall, I watched him leave, not defeated, but humbled, carrying the weight of his choices, but also carrying a chance to do better. That night, I called my mother and told her what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. How do you feel, baby? She finally asked. Peaceful, I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying his weight anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I wasn't useless. I wasn't defined by his failures. I was just free. He kept his word. The letter came 2 weeks later, 5 pages of real accountability, real remorse. My mother cried when she read it. Not tears of sadness, but tears of closure. The donations started the next month. Small amounts, but consistent. Money that helped other single mothers get legal help, find housing, rebuild their lives. He'd made his decision 15 years ago, when he walked away from us with nothing but a voicemail. Now I'd made mine, to choose healing over hatred. I kept building. The company grew. We helped more women every year. I bought more properties, kept rents affordable for working families, and created stable housing for people who needed second chances, even for him eventually. Tyler was right that day in the coffee shop. Some men destroy families, but the real victory isn't destroying them back. It's building something so beautiful, so meaningful, that their destruction can't touch it. You'll be better off without me, he'd said when I was 13, leaving us to survive on our own. I proved him right, at 28, not by punishing him, but by becoming everything he said I'd never be. He taught me I was useless. I built the very system he needed to survive, and I chose to save him anyway, because some people don't deserve second chances. But giving them anyway is what makes you stronger than they ever were. It's what breaks the cycle they tried to trap you in. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, the power to choose who you become in the face of those who tried to destroy you. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's rising above the need for it. If stories like this resonate with you, if you believe that healing is stronger than hatred, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who turn their pain into purpose. Because everyone deserves to know that no matter how useless someone makes you feel, you have the power to prove them wrong, with grace. Remember, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming someone so strong, so successful, so at peace, that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant.